Here we go, friends. I'm going to play it. We're going to start it. YouTube live on in the Zoom, please make sure you mute it. I can hear it on somebody's screen. There we go. Great. All right. Welcome everyone to Yaps. Oh, make sure you mute it, please. All right. I can hear myself. If you have the YouTube live on, it was me. It was me the whole time. Every time. Welcome everyone to GRCB's first ever Youth Activism Project's live presentations. Please forgive us for any technical difficulties, but welcome to everyone who's watching. We're so glad you're here, right? Yeah, we're excited. Thank you for joining us. So we're gonna start. I'm going to start us off. My name is Charlotte Huffman. I am the Girls Rock year-round programming director, something like that. And I'm really excited because this summer we started a brand new program that took my heart and swept it away. I love this program. I love these youth, and I can't wait for you all to get to learn about it. If you don't know about Girls Rock Campaign Boston, our mission is that we empower girls, women, and youth and adults with marginalized gender identities to believe in themselves by building a supportive community that fosters self-expression, confidence, and collaboration through music education and performance. So this summer, we were not able to do our normal summer sessions, which made us all very, very sad. But it became a perfect opportunity for us to try a brand new program virtually. So this program, Youth Activism Project, was grown out of the silver lining that we're able to start a new program. So this summer, these youth all defined a community that they belong to. They collaboratively decided on a research question that felt really important to them and the people in their community. They did research in a bunch of different ways, surveys, online research, interviews, and then they took all of that information, they brought it back together, and they're going to tell you about what they learned this summer. We're hoping that in the future, this was such a short time that in the future, YAP also goes on to actually doing activism, which is so awesome. But the education part of it, knowledge is power, is what they did this summer. They gained more power through knowledge. And I'm so proud of everything they did. And I'm so excited for you all to get to see and hear from them. So I think that's everything that I needed to say. I'm really proud of these youth. And we're going to start off with some introductions before we start our presentation. So again, I'm Charlotte Huffman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm going to pass it over to the youth. Actually, it's adults first. Technical difficulties again. Madison.
Hi, so my name's Madison. I use she, her pronouns. And what is our other question we're answering? I'm also having technical difficulties. I'm happy
what
to be.
Working group were you part of?
I was leading the new data group. So we were gathering brand new data this summer.
Thanks, Madison.
My name is Mika. My pronouns are she or they, and I was leading the existing data group in researching our research question. And I'm gonna pass it to the youth. Helen M., you're up.
My name is Helen. I'm 17. I use she, her pronouns, and I was part of the Power Structures group.
Awesome. Amaya's up next, but I think Amaya's mic is not working.
Amaya's mic is not working. So Amaya's gonna type it into the chat.
I'll read it out for her. My name is Amaya. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm a part of the Power Structures group. I am 13. Will you wave for us, Amaya? Hi, Amaya. Awesome. Up next, we have Carolyn.
I'm Carolyn, I'm 17, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm part of the new data group.
I'm Trin, I'm 13, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also part of the new data group.
Hi, I'm Verena, I'm 14, I use she, her pronouns, and I am also part of the new data group.
I'm Sydney, I'm 17, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm part of the existing data group.
Hi, I'm Evangeline, I'm 16, I use she, her pronouns, and I am also part of the existing data group.
I'm Esme, I use she, her pronouns. I am 14 years old and I am part of the new data group.
I'm Annabelle, I'm 15, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm part of the existing data group.
I'm Helen, I'm 17, my pronouns are she or they, and I was part of the Power Structures group.
And then we'll go to Audrey.
Hi, I'm Audrey. I'm 16. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm in the Power Structures group.
Yay! Thank you, everyone. These are the amazing youth we worked with this summer. We don't have everyone here. We're hoping that more people will join us along the way and come, but luckily their presentation is pre-recorded. So we had 3 working groups: new data, existing data, and power structures. They all did an amazing job. And what you're about to watch with us is a video of their presentations of the data. After the video of the presentations, we will have a Q&A. So please stay tuned, save your questions, and as soon as that video is over, put your questions into the YouTube live chat so that our youth can answer them. So we're really excited you're here, and we're gonna get started with the presentation. So everybody in this Zoom room, please turn off your cameras and your microphones. Sorry, everyone. We are having a little bit, again, of technical difficulties, but I am going to try that again with the sound shared so that everyone can hear it. So we're going to try that one more time. Thank you. This is our first time doing this. All right, here we go. We're trying again.
So, hello, we are GRCB's Youth Activism Program, and here our research question is, how does the representation in the media affect the mental health of young women and gender nonconforming youth? For the history of the portrayal of women in media, actresses have frequently been hypersexualized in film and TV, for example, Marilyn Monroe and Carrie Fisher. Women are often portrayed in domestic roles and are less likely to be portrayed in STEM roles. Women are conveyed as perfect or sexy and usually fit into the European beauty standard of being frequently skinny, white, blonde, highly feminine, and the damsel in distress. In children's TV, there have typically been more male characters than female characters, with male characters outnumbering female characters 2-1. Only in the last 5 to 10 years have gender nonconforming characters really been portrayed in entertainment. And in 2014, of the top 100 grossing films, women represented 30% of all speaking characters. In 2019, women comprised 34% of all speaking characters. In only 5 years, female speaking characters only went up by 4%. In magazines and advertisements, women have historically been in content relating to beauty, fashion, and house cleaning appliances, and are less likely to be portrayed in sports magazines. And when they are, the magazines more tend to focus on their body, their femininity, what they're wearing, less than their athletic achievements. And then women in ads and magazines have often also been depicted as perfect or sexy, photographed with tons of makeup and perfect hair, even when the advertisement is saying that they are wearing no makeup or all natural, which really skews what beauty standards are.
We're going to start by talking about existing examples and data about representation of women and gender nonconforming people in the media. But before we do that, we're going to define some key words that are involved in this presentation. Firstly, mental health. Mental health affects emotional, social, and psychological development. It can involve both specific conditions and just generally developing a healthy approach to your emotions and your sense of self. Media is a pretty broad term. It can include social networks like Twitter and Snapchat, or scripted content like movies and TV. Basically, it refers to sources of ideas and information that we learn from, communicate with, or entertain ourselves with. Most of the media we're discussing today is electronic, but it can also include print sources like books and magazines. Social media is a subset of media. It's defined as websites and applications that enable users to create and share content or participate in social networking. It involves more the communication aspect of media and seeing what's going on in other people's lives, like friends or celebrities that you follow. Representation is another pretty broad term. In this presentation, we use it to refer to the treatment of a certain group by the media. So how often you see that group in the media, how accurate that portrayal is, and some common trends and stereotypes in that portrayal. Objectification, which means literally to treat as an object, means ignoring the nuances of a person or group in favor of just using them as a means to an end and ignoring their individuality. Finally, GNC just stands for gender nonconforming. It applies to trans and non-binary people. So what are some common problems that we see with representation of women and gender nonconforming people? In reality, women and gender nonconforming people are people. They're a large, diverse group with their own choices and personalities, but sometimes media doesn't reflect that reality, and representation is lacking or inaccurate. So here are some key ways that that manifests itself. Firstly, there's just a lack of representation. There's generally more representation of cis men than of women, trans, and non-binary people, and we need to see more of these groups in media. Secondly, more specifically, objectification, which we already defined, draws the focus to a person's appearance. It makes it seem like someone's only purpose comes from what they look like or how they appeal to other people, which isn't true. Also, many fictional characters who are women, trans, or non-binary people don't have their own agency or interests. Instead, they're used to highlight another character or to convey a message. Many female characters, like damsel in distress characters, don't make their own decisions, but just show how important or heroic another character, usually a male character, is. Also, many trans and non-binary characters have their whole narrative centered around their transition or coming out. And while that story is important to tell, it's also important to remember that nobody is defined by their gender and that they have other interests outside of that. Finally, many trans characters are played by cis actors who are portrayed in a negative way that creates false negative assumptions.
As of 2015, about 24% of the people we see in the media are women. An analysis of popular films across 11 countries in 2019 found that 31% of all speaking characters were women and that only 23% featured a female protagonist. Of the 488 regular and recurring LGBTQ characters on scripted primetime broadcast, cable, and streaming programs, only 38% are transgender, and they only appear on 28 shows. This demonstrates that there is not enough transgender or gender nonconforming representation in the media currently. A report about children's TV in the United States from 2019 found only 30% of characters were women or girls. The majority of characters were thin, 1% of characters had any sign of physical disability or chronic disease. 2% of characters were portrayed as having lower socioeconomic status, when about 20% of children in the US live below the poverty line.
Next, we'll be talking about social media and the effects of social media on mental health. Social media is used predominantly by younger people, whose social and mental health is still developing because of their age. A study found that 91% of those aged 16 to 24 have a social media platform. For those aged 55 to 64, only 51% of those use a social platform, and of those aged 65 or older, only 23% of those people use a social media platform. Because social media is used by such a group of impressionable people, they can be impacted when they don't look like the people that they see on these platforms. When people are raising themselves to unrealistic body standards, their mental health can be negatively affected. A quote from a study stated that exposure to hundreds and thousands of these inaccurate and unrealistic images over time sends the message that they are common and normal within society, when in fact they are difficult, if not impossible, for most people to achieve. In fact, these images are almost always digitally manipulated, modified, and enhanced to achieve this ideal body type, creating an even larger gap between reality and what we see in the media. The impact of not being able to look like these characters in the media is associated with decreased self-esteem, body satisfaction, depression, and eating disorders. A study showed that girls reported more negative body image and media influence scores than did boys in late childhood and early adolescence. Body image concerns, including an increased desire to change their appearance, of social media users are higher than those of non-users. A study found that 78% of girls say that by the age of 17, they do not like how they look. When ranking social media platforms from most positive to most negative, YouTube was found to be the most positive platform, while Instagram was found to be the most negative. Children use media, including social media, to define who they are, who others are, and to create beliefs about people. This becomes problematic when people are underrepresented or have negative portrayals in the media. This can be portrayals of identities such as gender, race, disability, or socioeconomic status. Another study showed that media exposure led to higher self-esteem in white boys, but lower self-esteem in white girls and Black girls and boys. An explanation for these findings is that non-white and non-male youth have little representation or negative representation in the media. They feel like they have to live up to unrealistic standards or that the standards shown are negative. If young people watch these negative depictions, they feel like they're invisible or unimportant, which severely impacts their mental health.
Our group conducted a survey on how representation in media affects the mental health of girls and gender nonconforming youth ages 13 to 17. This is the data we received from that survey. Nearly all of our survey takers identified as cisgender female, which may have affected the results. We started by asking everyone some preliminary questions, such as what forms of media they use the most. Instagram came in first place, with nearly all of the survey takers using it. Second came TikTok, and in third place, Snapchat. The social media giant Facebook was actually the least popular of all options. We also asked how much time people spent per day consuming media. About 50% said they spent more than 4 hours per day, and 25% spent more than 6 hours daily.
87.9% of teen girls and GNC youth believe that there is a form of media that positively represents them. In contrast, there is an even division between those who do not believe there is positive representation and those who are unsure. One respondent does not feel that there is one media that positively represents anyone consistently. Later in this survey, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube showed the greatest amount of inclusion of positive representation. Additionally, several respondents considered that there is a progressive side on media platforms, which is more likely to have positive representations.
Next, our survey asked, are there forms of media that you feel negatively represent yourself or do not represent yourself and people you identify with? And if so, which ones? So 68.8% of respondents feel that there are negative representations of girls and GNC youth in the media. The first thing I wanted to point out is that every media, or most media, has multiple sides to it. So, for example, Instagram ranked on top for having both positive and negative representations. As previously discussed, this could be due to it having a progressive side and then just the rest of it being more negative. I think that this explains the duality of content throughout the media industry. Another popular answer noted the influence that celebrities have. Often society looks up to celebrities in an inspiring manner as our idols. Yet we heard multiple responses of people feeling pressure from society to meet this unrealistic standard of beauty that influencers hold. So oftentimes celebrities also have staged or professional photos, which can be very misleading. This quote explains these unattainable standards and also says that Instagram is probably the most prominent culprit of this. My last statistic that I think is really powerful is that 96% of people feel that there are unrealistic stereotypes and standards of people that they identify with in the media.
Our last question on the survey was, how do these representations have an effect on mental health? So we basically split everyone's answers into 4 main groups. The 4 groups being beauty standards, coming in the biggest at 41.9%, self-esteem coming in right after that at 37.2%, mental health at 16.3%, and distrust of society at 4.7%. As you can see on this slide, there are many different quotes from the answers that were the responses that we got on this survey question, and 75% of people felt that these representations, stereotypes, and unrealistic standards affect their mental or emotional health.
Questions inquired if the respondents had any resources to discuss emotional and mental health. We clarified that this applies to more than just a therapist, so it could be a friend or family member or really anyone they had to talk to. So compared to the large majority of people who felt a negative impact on their emotional well-being, almost 17% felt that they had no one to discuss their mental situation with. That number rose to 23%, almost a quarter, who felt that they had no one to discuss representations in the media with. So overall, our compiled data from the survey concludes that the media does have a negative impact on the mental health of girls and gender nonconforming youth in a variety of ways through misrepresentation, underrepresentation, and unattainable or just false stereotypes and standards.
So I interviewed women and gender nonconforming people in the media industry to see what their experience was like and how they thought power dynamics affected their experiences. And so the first person I interviewed was Keely Dower, and she's an employee of the fundraising department at WGBH, which is Boston's NPR station. And she told me that 38 out of 40 of her employees in the fundraising department are actually female. And so they didn't have any sexual harassment or gender discrimination training, but they did have respectfulness training for the workplace, which sort of encompassed that in general. And she really attributed her comfort in her workplace, and she felt like she could really advance in her workplace because she had female bosses that made her feel so comfortable. And another person I interviewed was Lindsay Anderson, and they used to be a former web manager at Tom Tom Magazine, which is a magazine about female and gender nonconforming drummers. And while they said that there wasn't any formal training around sexual harassment, they really felt supported as a non-binary person, and the company really pushed for female and gender nonconforming people to succeed in music. And while their experiences are really positive and great, it's important to remember that most women in the media industry have a completely different experience because there's really like a confirmation bias, especially as GRCB's contacts tend to be incredibly progressive. And Vivian Schiller, who was NPR's first female CEO from 2009 to 2011, quoted, and she said that it feels like the number of women CEOs is not growing. It's just kind of spotty. And researching this has shown that while women and men tend to have equal gender distribution in lower positions, upper management is really male dominated. And so I've compiled a list of companies with male CEOs, and they just really include every single major media publication, while companies with female CEOs only include PBS and Cumulus Media. And so that really affects the type of media and content that we see surrounding women that affects people in their everyday lives.
I did a research survey with a few women and gender nonconforming people in the media, asking how they felt about their representation. And the people that I surveyed generally had a varied experience in the field, ranging from 5 months to 20 years, with most of the people who I interviewed being 18 to 39 years old, involved in traditional media, and the majority falling under she, her, hers pronouns. In general, only 25% of the surveyors felt that they were represented in the media that they produced, while the other 75% didn't feel like the representation was frequent or accurate. And the same for how they felt represented by other women and gender nonconforming people. And when asked, 75% of women and gender nonconforming people felt like they would be more successful if they were men, which is very sad in the fact that they had the pressure to be somebody else and be able to be successful in their work environment. And many felt that their work environment would allow them to only allow them to create surface level content, and felt suppressed working in these environments and had the pressure to put out perfect content wherever they went, which led to many of them feeling the need to suppress who they were and their ambitions in the job. And the group itself was split on whether they felt the need to downplay their gender identity, with some choosing to be who they are at risk to their own success. So they would downplay who they were to be able and not have the success that they deserved for being who they were in the content that they pushed out. And 75% of people did not feel like their involvement actually did boost the representation in the media. And finally, they all wished that their jobs would allow for more opportunity for women and gender nonconforming people, which would allow them to have the representation that they deserve, along with so many others, including the youth. So they don't feel like the content that they're pushing out and that their companies are pushing out are actually helpful for any women, gender nonconforming people, and youth. And in general, they felt like they did not have a perfect representation of who they were.
Social media platforms can be cruel, and so can real life, but more and more people are standing up and speaking out. We are improving the situation little by little, and with enough time and support, we can make a significant difference in the world. Spreading positivity through media and in person, educating others and showing them there are problems, and joining or starting a project to spread the cause are all things you can do to help.
Woo! Yeah, we did it. That was amazing. Great job, all of you. OMG. That was great. Thank you so much, everyone who's watching on YouTube Live right now. It looks like we have 27 people watching, which is really awesome. So now is the time to ask questions. So please, please, please put your questions in the chat of the YouTube Live so that our youth can answer them, because they have done a lot of really hard and amazing work, and we really want them to shine and be able to answer some really amazing questions. So I'm looking at the chat and we don't have any questions yet, but I know that there's a lag. So maybe I will ask a first question and say, what was the process of each of the working groups?
Coming from the power structures group, I'll answer for us. We had a little bit of a rough start. Not everybody was showing up to our meeting, but we did a lot of individual research and a lot of like individual work in general. And I think that allowed us all to get the ideas we wanted into the presentation without limiting what we wanted and what we wanted people to see. And I think that really worked out well for us. So I think it was a long process, quite long, but I think we did a really good job with how we managed it.
Awesome. Thank you, Helen. Does anybody want to answer from one of the other working groups? What was your process?
I was a part of the new data working group, and we started by making a survey, which on Google Forms, which we sent out to everyone, and then we put all of the data that we got into some of the graphs, which you saw on the slides, which for me was actually the most satisfying part. I love any and all graphs, but it was I really enjoyed all parts of the process because we had a lot of data to work with, and I think that the way that we collected it, it was really successful. We got a lot of replies.
Awesome. And would anyone from the existing data group like to share?
I can go. So for existing data, a lot of our process was about researching existing information. So we started by just learning how to research in general, and then sort of more independently research what our own interests were. So it was a lot about understanding what all of us were passionate about following and helping each other through that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now there are a lot of questions in the YouTube chat. So I'm gonna let our youth facilitators facilitate and ask that the other adults and we're gonna turn our cameras off and let the youth shine. So go ahead, y'all.
So one of the questions that we just got was, what was the most surprising thing in your research? So if someone wants to answer that.
I can answer that one. I feel like it wasn't for me one thing in particular, but just kind of looking at some of the statistics and data we saw in general about representation was just kind of surprising. For example, one that stood out to me was that only 8% of all LGBTQ characters are transgender. So that just the lack of representation of groups was kind of shocking. And I feel like that these are important to highlight because they are so shocking.
I think another surprising part of the research that we found, at least in our group, was just how sad it was. Like we all know that it was a very like big issue that we all wanted to tackle, but for when I looked at survey data from everybody and interview data, it was really sad to see how people felt about how social media affected them and what it was like working in social media and how they had to suppress themselves, or how people can't really be themselves when they should be themselves in a safe environment. So I think one of the most surprising things was really seeing how many people were actually affected instead of just seeing a screen in comparison. And does anybody else want to add on, or? Okay. So our next question is, what new questions do you want to investigate now that you've done your great research? Does anybody want to take this one? Sydney? Okay.
One thing I'm really interested now, after seeing a lot of the ways that media gets it wrong, is finding more positive examples. I think that they're definitely out there, even if these trends are harmful, and I'd love to learn more about people who are working to make the media a more positive place.
There were definitely a lot of really good ideas for possible subjects that we could pursue when we were deciding on the topic that we wanted to research. There was stuff about climate change, racial justice, how much youth are involved in activism. And I think really in the future, it would be interesting to examine any of those and learn more about them. So yeah, we had lots of interesting ideas came up during that discussion, and I hope that in future sessions we'll get to explore some of them.
So does anyone want to add on to that, or So our next question was, what are your ideas on how we can bring about change? So if someone wants to answer that. Verena.
I think that the first step is really all about education and awareness, which is what we worked on this time. So really understanding what people go through with underrepresentation and misrepresentation. And then I think just educating and spreading awareness about how harmful that this can really be, because it obviously is something that affects so many people, but it's often kept quiet or people aren't quite comfortable discussing it. So spreading awareness and then encouraging people to be themselves on social media and encouraging people who have an influence, I think, in the media to try to be diverse with who they cast or try to have more representation of different groups of people, I think would be the next step.
Great. So, oh, Annabelle.
Even like you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to go out and do like a big thing. Like even if you just like sign a petition, make like small donations, like Verena said, like spread awareness. Like it doesn't have to be a big thing. Even like the small things, they can bring change. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
And I'll add on one last thing from the power structures group. I think one of the main things that I think can really affect change is going to those media companies and demanding for more representation so that the media that is put out through like traditional media and some of social media will be more accurate to the actual experience of women and gender nonconforming people. And I feel like that will really help representation and making people feel included in their community. And I feel like just getting more female representation in GNC information in actual media companies will help with so much of other media issues and mental health related issues from the media. And we have another question on how will you think differently about the media after doing this research? Does anybody like to answer that question? Okay, how about Annabelle, then Sydney?
I feel like I've always been pretty critical of the media, but I feel like now even more so, because there are a lot of steps to be like taken to getting like inclusive, and I feel like yeah, I think I'm gonna be a lot more critical in the future about it, because representation is a thing that everyone should have. And yeah, so.
Well, one of the really interesting things we learned in the course of our research was just how much of the people involved in social media are youth and girls. And I think that sort of gave me a new perspective on like, yes, the media can be a bad place, but we also have a lot of power to change it. And I think that was really cool to learn and will make me feel more ready to enact change in places like that in the future.
Does anybody else have something to add before we move on to our next question? All right, well then our next question is, what self-reflections did you make during this process? Anybody?
I think going off of what Annabelle and Sydney just said, I was also aware before this workshop started, of course, of that there were messages in the media that were not, that were harmful towards girls and gender nonconforming youth. And I feel like after this, I just notice it so much more, the stuff you see when you scroll through a social media feed or in an advertisement on TV. And I think after this, I might just try and not, that's something that I don't feel like I need to pay attention to. I'm going to try and not have that be something that factors into my life or how I make decisions. And I think that doing this workshop helped me realize that a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question on how we personally self-reflected on this process. And I'm somebody who personally doesn't use social media that often. I only use it to really catch up with friends, but it was really sad, as I said before, to see how many of my friends and other people that I know were affected by this. And I felt like it gave me an even a bigger passion to try and help support them and help them have the information to show that they're perfect people in their own senses and they don't have to worry about it. It just kind of gave me the push to be more accepting and comforting to people who really do use social media and take it so closely to heart when they scroll through the Instagram feed and they see someone and it makes them feel bad about themselves. Like it really like brought that to my eye, and I feel really bad for my friends who've been affected by that. And it just helped me personally become a little bit of a better person and more accepting to that kind of issue. And we have another question. And how will you think differently about media in a personal level after doing this research?
This is kind of an add-on to this last question, but something that we looked at in our research was we saw the negative effects of mental health, but then we also did a little bit about, how can we positively impact our mental health. And a bunch of studies showed that if you curate your feed to have positive images, positive accounts that promote kind of increased self-worth and these kinds of things, people's mental health improved. So just kind of on a personal level, looking at, okay, what do I follow? What are the things I'm looking at? And can I change this to, kind of look at more positive accounts and images?
And adding on to that, I have a similar thing to say. Just being more careful with what accounts I follow, what books I read, TV shows I watch, really like any type of media that this is a part of and that this issue affects, and just making sure that the media that I follow and the accounts that I follow and watch are really empowering women and empowering gender nonconforming folks and being inclusive and having the most representation. And I feel like just supporting those types of media is really important.
Audrey, yeah.
I think it's important to remember that the change doesn't stop here after this. It's that we all have to make the effort to consistently and persist with sharing information and educating people, and that's going to be how change will last, is the persistence of everything.
Does anybody else have anything to add on before we move on to the next question?
Okay. Our next question was, what was the most challenging part of this whole process? So does someone want to answer and start us off there?
Sydney, yeah.
I mean, I think, well, first of all, we were all a bit sad to not see each other in person, and there's always sort of technical difficulties with this, and while it's nobody's fault, we're all wishing we could connect in person like we used to.
Does anybody else have anything else to add? Trin?
Yeah, I was just going to go off of that and say that it was definitely a little difficult this year having to, be on Zoom and not being able to fully connect in person with each other to share our ideas, meaning that sometimes some people would get kicked off and it was pretty hard sometimes. So that was probably our biggest roadblock, but otherwise I think our process, the whole thing went really smooth, and yeah. And does anyone else want to add on before we go to the next question? Okay, so the next question is, do you think the social media platforms can fix this, or is it a cultural problem more than technology?
That is a really good question. I'll say that. Personally, at least from my research, I think it's a shift of both. Seeing a change in culture would definitely help, because culture is directly related to media, especially now when everybody's streaming and most of the people are online. And I feel like with technology, it kind of relies within the own companies and the own media conglomerates to kind of try and help. And I feel like that's really hard to get big corporations to help out many people personally. So I think that it has to be a shift in both kind of categories with social media and culture, because even after, let's say, everybody stopped using social media, the culture would still have those effects on people, and those institutions would still be in place, and people would still feel the need to look a certain way after the fact. So I think it has to be a cultural and a shift in technology.
Going off of what Helen just said, it is, as you pointed out, absolutely both a problem in culture and technology. But I think one of the things that we learned is that technology should be or can be part of the solution. As Sydney pointed out earlier, one of the statistics that we learned is that the majority of people using social media are actually young girls. And since we are the majority on social media, we can use that to try and make it into a more positive place. So I think it is absolutely a problem with both society and technology, as Helen said, but I think that technology and society, they can both be a part of the solution.
I think it's also important to remember that this was an issue before social media came up. It's an issue in the entertainment industry, in magazines, and a bunch of different media. And so I think it's not just tackling social media, and it's tackling it in all different types of media, because some people only consume one or the other. And I think making it make change in all fields, I think, would be the best.
All right, if that's all for that question, our next question is, are there any brands or companies you're no longer following because of how they represent or don't represent gender nonconforming folks and women?
I know one brand that has kind of been in controversy recently is Brandy Melville, because of how their employees treat people who are not like the beauty standard. So I feel like that is one company I feel like I wouldn't really want to support anymore because of that. So
Adding on, actually talking about the same company, how their clothing, Brandy Melville, has a one size fits all, but the one size is directed more toward extremely thin, or like just the one size would be like a very smaller size, and that's not inclusive toward people of all sizes, and that's part of people needing to fit that unrealistic beauty standard. So I think that company adds to that.
Kind of on a similarly related thing, I personally don't really follow Kylie Jenner or the Kim Kardashian brands for makeup, partially because of how they edit their photos in a sense to make people feel kind of bad about themselves, or sell products to make them look better or look like them, which is kind of unrealistic standard in a sense, and also how they treat their workers, especially their female workers in Bangladesh. They've been noted to not pay them properly, or there's been reports of abuse or not proper working environments. So I personally don't support them just because of many issues. So that's just a couple of companies that I personally don't support.
Great. So does anyone else have anything to add on before we move to the next question? Okay, so our next question is, how can you use social media to impact positive change? I would say first that what I do is I always like to share resources, share links to help sign petitions, or just to learn more. That does a lot, as long as if you go do the work, it's there. So I feel that a lot of people who are doing that, that's very good. And also just bringing in positive change in the first place definitely helps a lot. So if anyone wants to add on to that. Helen Z.
Well, I would say that social media is really like a double-edged sword. And so, yes, it can be used to spread a lot of like negative beauty standards, but especially right now, it's used a lot for activism. And like Trin said, you can spread links and information. And as long as you try to spread good information, then I feel like social media can be used for positive change.
Carolyn, you raised your hand for a second. Would you still like to answer?
Yes. I think that if we continue to share positive information, whether it be on your story or posting about it, that it can enact positive change.
Marina?
I'd like to also say and kind of give a shout out to we saw a workshop called Real Media Media Girls, and it's about being a real media girl. And when you're sharing personally content on social media, posting content that makes you feel good and posting what you want and not trying to edit your photos if you don't want to, and you don't have to fit this unrealistic standard. So I think just encouraging everyone, and especially youth and teens, to just be themselves in the media will cause for a lot more accurate representations.
Does anybody else have anything to add on? Okay, I'll just add on as well that we, as at least some of us, are part of the Teen Are Taught, which is continuing our project YAP throughout social media. So we have our own social media account that we're using this data that we presented to you guys today as a way to get a bigger reach to people who couldn't make it to the meeting or aren't as aware of this issue as other people. So we're also we're using that platform. A few of us on this Zoom call are using it to spread change and give the data that we just researched, and hopefully we'll be able to continue it all the way to the next YAP program. So follow us there. Our Instagram, one second, I can't remember our Instagram handle. I have horrible memory.
Project with no spaces, just all lowercase.
Youth
We're going to be posting some more of the data that we found during our project. So stay tuned for that.
So if you want to check us out and relook over some of our data, check out our Instagram. And other than that, I don't think we have any more questions. So I think that we could maybe move on to thank yous if the adults want to come back.
Great. Yes, it's thank you time. Thank you everyone who was here to watch on YouTube Live, our very first YouTube Live for the end of our very first YAP session. This was a pilot program. We tried a lot of new things. This is all new. So thank you so much everyone for coming. And then I'm going to turn it over to the youth for their thank yous.
Okay, so I'm kicking off our thank yous. As a youth group, we first wanted to thank GRCB for putting this whole program on. I've personally been doing GRCB for close to 10 years now, and I'm so happy to be able to continue doing this program with such lovely people throughout COVID-19 and be able to have this experience last as long as I can. So I really appreciate GRCB for trying to keep the interaction going. And I'll pass it off to Trin.
So I would like to thank Miss Colleen Manning, who worked with us in creating evaluations to create a safe and well-working environment during our YAP time at YAP and throughout our whole program. So I will be passing it off to Verena.
I'd like to give a big shout out to Madison, who is actually on the Zoom. She is the leader of the New Data Research Group, and she did so much in helping us make our survey and getting it shared and compiling our data. And she was just so supportive throughout the whole thing. So from the New Data Group, we'd like to thank Madison.
I'm here to thank Sarah, who taught us about project management and is basically the reason any of us knew how to get stuff done. I don't know where we'd be without you, so thank you so much.
I would like to say thank you to Mika from myself and the entire existing data group. Thank you for not only helping us do our research and figuring out how to do it all, but having a ton of fun with us and supporting us and just being an awesome leader. So thank you so much.
We'd also like to thank Kay, who came to talk with us about artivism. She knows a lot about leading activist movements. She was part of the Silent Sam Project. She is an amazing activist who really inspired all of us working on this project. So thank you, Kay.
I'd like to thank Charlotte first as the leader of the Power Structures group. You helped us so much, you motivated us, and we couldn't have done it without you. And then also as just the leader of this whole program, you really made this place so fun to come to and so welcoming and really inspired all of us to do this work. So thank you from all of us.
Lastly, I just want to thank everyone who's watching. We all appreciate you listening to all the stuff we've done and our hard work. And I want you to keep an eye out for future YAP stuff that we might do. So yeah, thank you for watching this live.
Yay! Is that all the thank yous from the youth? Very well done, by the way. I didn't know what they were going to do. It was really excellent, excellent thank yous. One more shout out to Media Girls for providing us with the Real Media Girls workshop. That was awesome. We have done so much critical thinking and good work this semester, and we could not have done it without our amazing volunteers, Mika and Madison. They've already been named, but I'll say them again. And Colleen, Sarah, and Kay, thank you all so much for all your help with this program. It could not have happened without you. I'm really excited for what's going to happen next with YAP. So I just wanted to make an announcement about that before we close. So applications to join YAP year-round to be able to do this work, but turn it into artivism yourself, will be opening for youth between grades 8 and 12, starting in September. So September, those applications will go up. The program will start in October. It will be a year-round virtual program. It's going to be really awesome. We'll do research again. We will do an educational event like this again, and we will also make artivism. So using creative voices to create activism and change in the world. And I'm so excited about it. So if you know a girl or gender nonconforming youth, gender expansive youth who would be interested in that program, please be sure to pass the application on to them when it comes up on our website in September. So every single one of these youth have made me so proud today. I can't even tell you. Thank you all. The biggest thank you of all goes to the youth who signed up for this pilot program when we didn't know what was going to happen. So huge shout out to the youth for doing such a good job. Great job, Youth Activism Project. You're amazing. You're amazing. Every single one of you are amazing. So that's going to be it from us. I'm going to double check my agenda. But yeah, that's it from us. Thank you everyone on YouTube Live for joining us. This was awesome. We're going to end the live now. So farewell.